Thank you for joining us for today's Leader to Leader. Today we have our trusted voices from boots on the ground, teachers in the field who are actually doing the work of facilitating remote learning. We're very fortunate to have a distinguished panel of educators from different disciplines and multiple regions of the state to share their experiences with you, what they've appreciated, what they're thinking, what they look forward to as we move forward. My name is Colin Rittmaster. I'm the Associate Executive Director at MASSP, and we are available in here to support you. If there's an opportunity that you'd like to just process or brainstorm or decompress or debrief with somebody, feel free to reach out to me through email, through Twitter, or on my cell phone. I'm available by text or phone at any time. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you to our panel who are with us. We're going to be going through more of a kind of like a fireside chat, kind of a dialogue amongst the panelists. So as participants, if you can remain muted, if you have a question that you'd like to raise, please do use the Q&A system. We had you introduced during the chat, but there is also in a webinar the Q&A. So we'll be moderating the question area to add questions there. If you see a question you really like, you can give it the thumbs up, and those that are more popular get risen to the top as we go from there. Please know we are recording this, and so once we are completed with the recording, we will distribute that in tomorrow's COVID-19 Daily for your review or reference, as well as for other members who weren't able to join us today. This is a dialogue, so it will be amongst our panelists that will be displayed in just a minute. They're going to take an opportunity to introduce themselves to you, including their name, the school they're in, their position, and kind of what their general approach is to distance learning at this time. And from there, then we'll get into what the impact of that's been on them, their families, and their students. I'll facilitate this conversation around that experiences, the lessons learned, and they're thinking forward. So with that, know that we have this little welcome. We'll get into the trusted voices, and at the end, we're going to ask you to just reflect and connect what you heard to your local experience. So as you listen to our educators share their thinking, their reflections, think about in what ways might their voices mirror or even conflict with your teacher's voices or your reality. And how do you know? How are we collecting that information, and how do we use it? So without further ado, we have a panel with us, and I'd like for each of them to be able to introduce themselves. And so as they're introducing themselves, I'll keep this slide up because this is the order they're going to introduce. After they introduce themselves, we'll go into the moderated conversation, at which time I will stop the sharing of the screen so we can see all of them displayed at one time, like the Brady Bunch, and then we'll just take turns answering questions with no specific order. So without further ado, I'm going to mute myself and ask that Erin kick us off with introductions.
Hi, my name is Erin Carlson. I am a teacher at Sandusky Junior Senior High School, which is in the Thumb. We are a very rural district. I teach 11th grade English, 7th and 8th grade STEM, and some 7th grade enrichment courses. Our initial rollout was to make sure that our students' needs were met first and foremost. So our first plan involved making sure that our students were one, fed, and that their mental health needs were met first. We also had to be very cautious and considerate of a lot of our students that do not have access to devices or the internet. In our rural area, we have students that, one, really can't afford to have the internet at their houses, and two, we don't have a lot of services available here. So even if one could afford the internet, they can't get service. So we have about 25% of our students on paper packets that teachers have developed and rolled out for an 8-week period. And then the other 75% are interacting with us on Google Classroom, and that's where our assignments are put out through Classroom. I also do a lot on Khan Academy with my students, but all of our assignments and correspondence happens through Classroom.
I guess that's me next. I'm Owen Bond. I teach English at Oak Park Freshman Institute. That's 9th grade then, obviously. Our approach has been, well, my approach personally has been to really focus on that social emotional connection with my students at this time. You know, they're all going through such different things. And in Oak Park, we're right outside of Detroit, we have similar issues with technology, with what students have access and what don't. We have given away literally thousands of laptops and hotspots and so on in our district to our students over this last few weeks. And so we're doing everything we can to be via Google Classroom, but I'm really focusing, you know, yeah, we're doing a novel study and we're doing academics, but I'm really trying to focus with my kids on making connections with them so they still feel the community of our classroom. You know, posting pictures and videos and just asking, what are you binge watching right now? And trying to stay connected to them on a human to human level more than anything else.
Hi, I am Kelly Kuzmano. I am an English teacher and leadership advisor at Rochester High School, Rochester Community Schools. This is my 15th and most crazy year of teaching that I can imagine. And before I taught in Rochester for a decade, I taught in Eaton Rapids outside of Lansing. And I grew up in Parma, Michigan. So I went from the small town to the east side and have had quite a road on the way. I also think it's important to mention that I am a mother of two who are in first and third grade. So momming and teaching isn't easy. I'm sure all of you parents out there can relate. Thank you for having me today.
Hello, my name is Ben Thompson. I am kind of going along the same route with family. We have a 5 and a 2-year-old. Well, 5 and just turned 3. 3 of the 4 birthdays in our household were during during the lockdown. So I am a high school teacher at Pawpaw High School, and I also do a lot with online learning. Our Michigan virtual students, I mentor them. We took an approach district-wide where we went with our essential standards and narrowed things down to just the bare minimum that we need to focus for students for next year. And so we've had a decent amount of success with that. There's still some kids that need to catch up a little bit. But we've just really been focused on those basic needs for kids, making lots of calls home, you know, rallying the community. Those are some of our focuses to just try and support each other. So I've been thankful to be in a building that has a lot of support with each other. I think that's another layer of this that's been really important to us, is that we had, I think, 5 babies at the high school born this year. So a lot of our teachers are young families. And so we've been supporting each other a lot so that we can support our kids, but also, you know, those that we consider our children in our classrooms as well.
Hi, I'm Shanna Meyer, and I am from West Ottawa High School in Holland. I teach math, and I am also an instructional coach for our math department. Our approach has been really to take care of the whole person first. So we made sure we had a robust food outreach program so that our kids were fed, that they had breakfast, they had lunch. So, you know, 3 times a week we're delivering meals. So kudos to the food service and the transportation departments for making all of that stuff happen seamlessly. At least it looked seamless from the public perspective. But then on top of that, recognizing that we have an incredible population that can't afford Wi-Fi and can't afford all of those types of amenities that some of our students are very privileged to have. So our district mobilized 15 hotspots via buses. They actually built hotspots in buses and went and parked them in 15 strategic locations around our district. So just the creativity, the kudos to our district leaders for doing all of that. On the teacher front, everything's communicated via Google Classroom. We all have Chromebooks, so we are fortunate in our high school that every student is one-to-one with technology. So they all have a device in hand, but not necessarily Wi-Fi access. So that was the biggest hurdle, is kind of keeping all of our kids connected. And as teachers, we've been making phone calls, administrators are making phone calls, just watching to see what students have not engaged or logged on. And similar to what Ben said, we really just looked at what's the absolute essentials that kids have to have from each of our courses in order to move on to that next course. And so those have been the topics that we focused on.
Hello, my name is Nick Fatiou. I'm a social studies teacher at Canton High School, one of the 3 schools that make up the Plymouth Canton Educational Park here in Canton, Michigan. I've been teaching at Canton for 12 years. Our district has had kind of like a 3-phase approach to how all this has happened. The first phase, very much similar to what you guys are talking about, involved just kind of a casual check-in of our students, trying to make sure they were okay, finding out what they were up to, making sure that everyone was safe and whatnot, but then also trying to find out who may be needing access and resources and whatnot. Our second phase was then focusing on coming up with essential learnings and understandings for content. And then our third phase, which we're currently working on now, is actually providing minimal levels of instruction. Every 2-week period is how we're doing it. And so that's kind of how things are rolling out within our high school.
All right, Sarah Gammons, I'm Director of Counseling at Northview High School. And we pretty much mobilized like the entire army of educators did in Michigan, similar to how all of you did, following really the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, getting the basics first and then moving up as we could. And actually, you know, we actually have some teachers extended learning now beyond the original projects for the students who are like wanting it, but not requiring it, as we all know can do no harm. So we really, we utilize a platform that we've been working on for a while, Maven, and it really helped give a feedback loop that was really consistent. And so actually on the first week that we had to formally say, you know, how many kids, you know, did we contact and who did we miss? And out of our 1,200 kids, we had like, I think it was 9 freshmen and, you know, 10 sophomores, and we had just a real minimum amount of kids that we hadn't had 2-week conversation with within those 2-week frames. So we really attribute it to this platform that looks at this 2-way communication piece, and it's used to deliver lesson plans, and then also, and then teachers are using their Google Classroom, you know, to augment that, but they're using it also for a lot of SEL. So teachers will deliver their lessons maybe on a Monday or a Tuesday, and then on another day that week they'll do a check-in, and so there's a continual feedback loop with students as to how they're doing, and then counselors are also delivering our curriculum through it. So it's been pretty phenomenal for us, and again, you know, just everything changes every week. Though you think it's going pretty well, and then you know, I think some of the stress for some of the students is really kicking in right now.
And last but not least, my name is Rosalie Rubelman. I am a proud Sterling Heights High School Stallion counselor. This is my 29th year in education. The first 14 were spent in the classroom and the last 15 have been in counseling. I've been at all 3 levels. I've been an elementary counselor, a middle school counselor, and this is my first year in the high school. I guess I just want to say ditto to all the other panelists, because we have, in Warren Consolidated Schools, we have done the same exact things that everyone else is speaking of, from, you know, the Zoom meetings, the reminds, the Schoology lessons and putting things out, to feeding our student population, to the tune of about 1,400 breakfasts and lunches a week at 3 different locations, with that kind of number going out every single week at each building. So we're feeding a lot of families and students. From the counseling perspective, we are reaching out very constantly to our students in our high school. We are, you know, making phone calls home to both students and parents, using Google Voice and texting and doing all those things to really try to assess the, you know, mental health needs of the students and their families, and see what we can do. We've been referring out to several of the services that are in our area, and also reaching out as a counseling staff to our families specifically. That's a little bit about us.
Thank you for sharing and introducing yourself. Hopefully, are we seeing now the whole panel at once? Awesome. So one of the things that I heard from each of you in different ways, but it all came back to that whole child, and that we know that if we don't take care of their needs, learning's not going to happen, and that your districts have taken this approach of whole child SEL, thinking about people first, and then thinking about the content and the essential skills second. Like that's a secondary piece that is almost like the +1 if we can get there. As teachers and counselors, what have you appreciated about your district's approach to working with the staff, taking care of their staff, preparing the staff, setting staff up to be successful to even work in this environment? And this is going to be more of a pop in, so feel free to unmute yourself. There's no particular order, but what are some thoughts? Feel free to build off each other's ideas as well.
I think for me, I just have appreciated the conversations that have taken place between my principal, Neil DeLuca, and then my superintendent, Bob Shaner. We have once a week staff meetings, and I mean, I teach at a big high school, so that's like 100 people on a Zoom. So it's pure chaos a little bit. But like, that's my time to feel this connection to my professional life. And so I have so valued those, and they're once a week, and they always start out saying, this is only going to take a half an hour. And honestly, they usually go an hour. And then there's usually people afterward that we're still talking because we miss each other. And then our superintendent has popped on to a couple of those. So I think what I would have been bereft to say is if no one would have reached out to me, I would have felt as lost as the kids. So I think as professionals, we need that touchstone too. We need, the people that we count on to have our back, to still have our back when we're at home. So I just think the more communication, the better. And I also know if I tagged them in on Twitter about some high school in New York that's doing a ski mountain for a graduation thing, and I just tagged them in it, and then somebody tagged back. And again, just those constant, we're here, we get you.
We've also been doing the weekly staff meetings in my building, which are so nice to see each other's faces. But right when this first started, my principal actually implemented an optional daily Zoom call. And they each had a theme. One day was show off your pets, and one day was wear a hat. And it was a little spirit week for the teachers. And not everybody attended every single one or anything, but it was, like you were saying, it was just really nice to see each other's faces and to feel connected to each other in that way. And I also appreciate that my administrators are giving a lot of grace, I feel, with us, where, we're not locked into what our contract time is. If we need to, I'm a night owl, so if I need to post something on Google Classroom at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm able to do that. And if I need to take the morning off because my cat got sick and I had to take him to the vet like I did yesterday, that's okay. We're all human beings, and this is an unprecedented situation. And so I feel like they're giving us a lot of grace as long as we are doing what needs to be done.
Yeah, my principal, I'm sorry, Erin, I apologize. My principal made sure to make it very clear, and she's new to us this year, but she wanted to make sure that we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and our families first above anything else, and that if there's anything that comes up and we need extra time, whatever it may be, to just kind of let her know. And that's been really good to hear from her, to share that to our staff. We also do weekly meetings that are about an hour each. She allows us all to share our thoughts, whether we want to just type it in a chat or whether we want to verbally say it at the meeting. But then she also she's calling them her fireside chats, which are just casual Friday meetings where people can just get together and talk in general, no set agendas or anything like that. And I know within our building, which is also well over 100 staff, our different lunch groups have been doing Zoom meetings and just trying to keep that camaraderie going on within our building. It's been very nice.
So I would second that, Nick. We have a weekly social hour where our staff can get together, and the only rule is that you can't talk about school. So that's been kind of nice to have that open communication with our peers, and just let everyone know that we are still human too, and our school has been so great in making sure that we are taken care of. I'm a mom of 3 at very different age groups, so having the ability to be flexible has been extremely important for me. And knowing that we have the administrators respect and support in what we're doing. I started a cooking channel with my daughter, and the school is very supportive of that type of learning as well, even though it may not cover the specific standards.
I want to give a shout out to our principal and our administration as well at Pawpaw. I know there's a lot of administrators across the state that have put a lot of time and effort into creating culture in their buildings. And honestly, our building is blessed to have a really great teaching culture. And so our PLCs have carried us right into this work. If they hadn't put those groups in place and all the effort into that over the past years, it'd be a little late to be doing that now. So thank you to all of the administrators that have made their PLCs pretty effective over the years.
I'd have to echo that also. And I think that even from the very top of from our superintendent, it really right out of the gate came with great communication, great leadership, and sort of a Northview pride sort of effort. And then it went into the high schools. And so we're still doing the same thing. And we're not having full staff meetings. PLCs are meeting regularly. And then we're having our DLT, our district leadership meeting, but we've added more people to that. So I think as we go, it's going to seem like a whole staff meeting eventually, but that level of communication and the amount of grace that administrators are using has really been key, I think.
I was going to echo what Ben had said. Our district has been absolutely amazing. Our administrators have built that positive culture among teachers. So kudos to Jason Reinecke and all the APs at West Ottawa. But it was a very seamless transition to go continue work with all of our PLCs. We've been meeting weekly with each of our PLC groups at a minimum. But every week we meet as a school improvement team for the high school. So all the department chairs come together and meet with all of the principals and assistant principals. And we get the feedback from parents. We get the feedback from all of the teachers. We bring it to that meeting. We hash all of those out. Everybody feels very heard and listened to. And it's something that team really can put together the plan. And then the principal communicates that in his Sunday email out to staff every week. So we all appreciate those. There's always some fun humor. And our principal staff has created the West Ottawa Good News Network. And so they've been posting those fun videos of what's happening in our area, especially with our graduates this year. So just all of that communication, both ways of listening to teachers, but also being really respectful of the fact that teachers have some difficult situations at home as well. So it's been great, and I've loved having that PLC support network in place that our district had supported previous to this. It made it a very seamless transition.
It's great to hear that within your districts, your administrators have really modeled and approached learning for adults just like you are approaching with your students, emphasizing relationships. The piece that was said earlier around grace and compassion over compliance and just doing, and the flexibility, it sounds like, has been appreciated. And as a result, it sounds like some of the productivity, particularly collaborative productivity, has increased in some ways because of the approach that's been taken, whether that's through your PLCs, your district leaderships, whatever those pieces are. As you think about the actual learning and the approach, some of you are using Google Classroom, some of you use Canvas, some of you use different pieces that way. One of the questions that came up from a couple different participants had to do with this idea of how you frame your lessons or the resources that you had there. Has there been something in particular that you found in how you approach your lessons that has had a positive impact on not just kids logging in, but actually engaging? Knowing that without that personal connection, kids can get lost or just kind of go silent.
Mind if I jump in on this one? So with math, math is pretty predictable. You have math hasn't changed in a really long time, at least the learning in high school. And so what we tried to do is to establish a routine as quickly as we could for our students. Because just going to school is a routine, and when you lose that, your brain's just kind of in chaos trying to grasp onto things. And so we just use like a framework of we called it focus, engage, feedback, and evidence. And so It spanned all of our subject areas. The first part of it is like, how do you get yourself? So we're trying to teach our kids, how do you get yourself to sit down and focus? Like, what is the purpose of the learning? What are your targets? What are the materials you're going to use? And that happens kind of like early in the week. And then as you progress through, like, how are you going to engage? What are you going to listen to, watch? What sort of practice materials? And then where are you getting your feedback from? And we have open office hours 3 times a week. And then how are you going to show your evidence? What does it look like? I think that's where, how do you show what you're learning to your teacher? And that's where I think we have some of the most difficulty is like, how do you communicate what you're learning virtually with kids? But we try to put it into some sort of routine so that kids could communicate with each other too about what they're supposed to be doing.
I think similarly, I think organization and helping our kids stay organized is so very important right now. So one of the things I've been doing is I've created a overall schedule of what they're doing sort of weekly. We organize ourselves weekly in our district. And so weekly, what are they doing in my classroom every week? And then also as like a checklist. So every time they click on the Google Classroom assignment, because I've been just one assignment per week, it has the checklist of what they should be doing in what order so that they don't get lost and end up confused in somewhere else, because I think we provide that pacing when we're in the classroom, and so trying to help them provide that pacing for themselves is so important right now.
I would second that one. Our school took the approach where we really didn't want our students receiving 7 notifications every Monday morning. So we developed a schedule district-wide. So our math teachers only post their weekly schedule on Mondays, English only on Tuesdays. So that's helped, I think, a lot, the mental health for all of us, knowing that we are only going to post assignments and students are only going to receive those assignments on that particular day. I mean, I have a lot of students that are now working a lot of hours because they are deemed essential workers at Walmart or fast food restaurants. So their timelines have changed so much, and we have to be flexible with that. So I've appreciated that schedule. I've also found that I've had to differentiate even more through this digital learning platform. I have to present things, 1 in paper, 2 audio for those learners that just need to listen and they can't be on a screen, having the Zoom, having just email office hours, having to have all of those different outlets for the students to perform their work in has been huge. So I would say making sure that we're differentiating, especially in this digital learning platform.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think flexibility is really one of those most important terms for us as teachers, especially now. So I know with my own instruction, so our district wants us to send stuff out every 2 weeks, but I still, within my little lesson plans, I almost do it like daily. Like, these are things that you could be doing every day. It's totally up to you if you want to do it day by day, because some of those students love that structure. But then I also share with them, like, you can go at your own pace as well within that 2-week chunk. And then on top of that, I'm trying to offer them every type of style. So whether it's telling them like, hey, here are the pages in a textbook, here are some videos online that I've recommended you can watch, and then also providing myself available through Zoom and WebEx meetings and all of that. Just trying to be flexible in that way, because some students can thrive just fine by doing it all on their own, reading from a book and then answering questions and being done. But some of those students want a direct, one-to-one meeting on a Zoom call or whatever it may be. So just trying to make sure that I'm available to the students and all their different needs and wants is what I've been trying to do overall. So.
Yeah, we've been finding in our district, with the use of the platform that we're using, the Maven platform, it's sort of like a virtual to-do. So when we set up with the different curriculum areas that we're using it, they would pick, like, Mondays would be science and whatever, and then that'd be their lesson plan delivery, and then they'd check in on Wednesday. And then, we staggered it so that when the students would, and most of them are using their phone, most are doing this on their phone because it's mobile friendly. And in that platform, the teacher can deliver a personalized video, but the student can look at it at whatever time they want to. So what we're finding actually from the data is that we have quite a group of them that like to look at it like 1 a.m. and it's open, on a 24-hour period on each day. So it's been really great for students to come in, weekly. And now they're in this pattern, and we've been actually taking a pre-test, post-test kind of question every week, and we ask them how they're learned from home, what challenges do they have. And on the first week, we had like 85% had challenges. And now as it's coming in today, we do it on Thursdays. And I think the last report right now, we had like 200 were fine and like 15 still had problems. And so we're able to get that data feedback, but we found that having the organization and the one-stop shop for kids to go to each teacher in has been really helpful in like reducing the anxiety of jumping all over all kinds of platforms. So it'll take them into their Google Classroom, but they see their teacher when they want to see their teacher. They give feedback when they want to give feedback, and really so far our parents are saying like thank you because before we started the phase 2 of our Learn from Home, everybody was kind of everywhere, and it was really hard, and kids felt like they were herding cats. So for our kids, it's been great to be able to touch base with them repeatedly, and they have kind of a pattern. They know what to expect.
So with Rochester, we have a schedule where Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays are curriculum, and then Tuesdays and Thursdays are for support. And we found that to be really helpful for us and for the kids, because they know that content is only coming those 3 days, and the other 2 days are, for our special education staff, our counselors, our social workers, and all that to do all the things they need to do. And then teachers have optional times during those 2 days to do, any additional support or check-ins or things like that they like. For me personally, I have a very wide range of kids that I teach. So I do honors English for sophomores, and then I co-teach remedial English for juniors and seniors. And it really is, that's where you can really see the divide, I feel like, in engagement. My honor students, for the most part, have, turned in things and checked in. It's my co-taught kids, it's my remedial kids, it's the kids that school was never their favorite. It's a real struggle. And so what my co-teacher and I have been doing is, we coined it communication fatigue. Like, I don't want to check in with those kids every day. They know at this point that Rochester has learning going on, and we've reached out and called each one of them. But at this point, I don't know what's happening in their environment that's preventing them from engaging, because I can't see them physically. So then it becomes more of a, are you doing okay? Just checking in, haven't heard from you from a while, and that SEL kind of cushion. And I think that's where, I think that's the biggest kind of hurdle. And I saw that in the chat that somebody asked that question about the drop off. I really think kids are like getting antsy. And then I think about in a regular school year, like this is about when seniors leave and kids are antsy in general. And now we're asking them, to only communicate with a computer screen in their house. So I think just being realistic and knowing that, I saw this on Twitter that somebody said, we know at the beginning of the year that we have hundreds of kids in one learning environment. And now we have all these kids in each individual learning environment. And I think just being realistic of that. So I'm keeping my grade book, and it says credit, no credit, revise for credit on every assignment. But I'm also realistic that I am not going to, or I'm going to have a very hard time telling a student that they're failing through no fault of their own. And I think those questions are things that we're all grappling with. And I think those are the kinds of things that's where the differentiation comes in, the talk because that's the biggest area I think we're all trying to get to. But we've been allowed to be very autonomous in our approach.
So Kelly, you brought up this idea that some of the engagement to Dale's question has to do with kids in kind of what classes. So if I'm passionate about English and I might be in an honors English class, I'm engaging. But if I didn't like English when it was face-to-face, I definitely don't like it now, maybe something like that. What another question came up from David Meyer, and he talked about like he's seeing better engagement within like hands-on projects or art type things. I'm just curious, for when you start thinking backwards on this last month or so of learning, what are you seeing students are actually a higher engagement in? So it sounds like some of the SELs just check-in stuff, but what are some of the things that you're finding that kids really got into? And this is for the whole panel. And what's working, and as counselors too, even what you're seeing from that piece. Then so I'll open it up to that piece. What are you finding works, has higher engagement than others?
Finding that with my students with math, it's pretty easy to gamify, to do some games. So a lot of the gamification stuff, so creating a bingo board, and here's a list of 25 different activities that you can do this week. And when you get bingo, send me a screenshot of what bingo you had and send me your evidence for your 5 squares. So maybe they're not all working on the same thing, but then now the next week they're going to work on getting another bingo. And the caveat was, if you're going to reuse one of the squares, you're going to have to redo that activity in another way. So, that's been really fun to get a few more kids engaged. And when we talk in our PLCs about the percentage of kids who are actively engaged, we saw that once we started to do some gamification, we got a few more back. We won't say we're batting 1,000, but we definitely got more of our students back when it started to be more choice and a little bit more fun.
So I specifically teach economics, regular and AP, and everything that's going on right now is just so relevant to my class. Like, things I was literally teaching about before this all happened is stuff that actually started to happen in real life. And so when I first started doing meetings with the students, we kind of spent the first time in a Zoom call or whatever, just kind of Q&A. So the kids were just showing up with all sorts of questions about what they were hearing on the news and online. And, they just kind of wanted to talk about what things were happening, and they wanted my own personal opinion of what things were going to happen and whatnot. And so besides the AP kids getting ready for their exams this week, it's just also, I've tried to steer them towards, like, you go out and look and see what kind of information and knowledge is out there, and let's share and have some conversations on that. And I've been really surprised how well they've interacted along that way. And it's been great to see them make the connections to the things we talked about in class to what is happening now. So I feel like I've been, I don't know if lucky is the right word, because I don't think there's anything lucky about what's going on right now, but to see the relevance unfold in front of their faces has been really cool to see. And then seeing them interact in a different way has been great as well.
For me, one of the things I've done is I have introduced Flipgrid to my classes. I don't know if anybody else knows this tool, but it's really cool. And, my kids all want to be TikTok stars, so they're really good at filming themselves doing stuff. And just giving them the option to respond to an academic question or a non-academic one by posting this short video that all their peers are going to be able to see and respond to. Again, I'm not batting 1,000, but it's getting more participation coming in. If I can say to them, instead of typing out, what do you think? If I can say, make me a 30-second clip about whether or not you think Beatty wanted Montag to kill him in Fahrenheit 451, go. And then they're making these Flipgrid videos back and forth to each other saying, no, you're wrong, I think this. And it's just been cool. And they wouldn't, I think, have engaged that way if I tried to make it like a discussion board where they had to type in their answers.
One of the things in our district, which was really a great idea, as it turns out, is that we're giving grades, we're giving the opportunity, if they engage in the Learn from Home phase 2, for a bump in their grade. So if they had a B- and they engaged in the project for their, let's say, math class, then they could move to an A-, or a B. If they had a B+, they could move to an A-. So they could get a little bit of a kick in their grade. And our district went with 2 main projects, so a curriculum project within each class, and then an overarching career awareness project that all the students would have to do. And so our department is running that, and we're running that through Maven. But we did that, we delayed start on that, so they all knew it was coming, and they got rolling on their academic courses. and then we delayed start it, and we're running it now. And so kids who are like finishing up and maybe going really fast on their learn from home, who might have checked out, actually have to hang on. so we're actually still having engagement with them and conversation, so we can still have check-ins and we still have that going on. But now they're engaging on this everyday, daily attendance into Maven, so we can see their attendance in it, and then we're getting feedback. And then it's set up. The lesson plan is set up for a reflection writing, so there's English in it. There's infographic reading, so there's some scientific type reading. There's a little bit of math in it, and then social studies we feel is like everything that's happening. But so we put some academic type curriculum in it, but it's actually run out of our office, and all the students are engaging in it if they want to get the grade bump, which has helped keep everybody rolling. So that's been helpful.
I would say for me, it's been trying to keep everything as related to life as possible, kind of away from the typical school approach. So for usually during this time, I do a personal growth literature circle unit anyway. So I just started promoting the energy bus, and we're doing a literature study on that right now. And it's been phenomenal to hear the kids come back and say, you know, this has changed my thinking. You know, we can get into a pretty depressed state during this time, but, you know, trying to challenge them to think outside of that negativity and how they can approach this differently has been huge for them. And like I said before, the cooking videos, making things connected to their life, that is, I think that first and foremost is what makes meaningful instruction for them.
So I think for me, it's been with my 2 different platforms, shout out to Fahrenheit 451, because that's tied in very well to this dystopian world that we're living in. So the relevancy, obviously, the choice, like I agree with someone, I've given my remedial kids have a whole like choice board that they can pick from. And I chose to focus for them. I kind of threw my lesson plans to the wind and focusing on real world writing, because I know I can prove that to them. And they are the kind of kids that need things proven to them. So everything that we're doing, I've shown them, okay, here's what you would do in the real world. Okay, here's what I'm asking you to do. You know, here's some options kind of thing. I've also heard from my colleagues in our high school, just lowering, not necessarily expectations, but kind of really distilling what we really want kids to have, and then cutting out the noise around it and really making like the less is more, the structure is clear, and the end game is in sight for them. I just think really, really helps. And even with my honors kids, because they tend to be the most anxious children on the population, I feel like, and they're all taking the AP US history test on Friday. So they're just anxieties through the roof. Just saying, you know what, I know exactly what we're doing for the rest of the year. And even if I don't, but just saying it and sounding like I know what I'm doing has really helped them calm down, and just really reassuring them that we've got it, we know what we're doing. The constant reassurance, I feel like, is very important. Choice, relevance, and then just being, I think they take so much from us being excited to see them. Even if they roll their eyes and I'm talking to a whole class of black screens with their names on it, I joke about that constantly. You know, I'm like, oh, wow, it's so great to see you, because it's just black screens. But just keeping that up so they know that someone cares. I think it doesn't matter what art project you have if you're not selling it at this point. We're salesmen as much as teachers right now, because that is what is going to get them to the end of the year.
One of the things that Kelly brought up was just how she did a credit incomplete kind of thing, and like credit needing revisions. Sarah, you mentioned about like grade bumps. That one of the questions from Steve Forsberg in Ludington was specific to how you're approaching credit, no credit, or grades in that. I appreciate hearing it's not about like traditional content, traditional lessons, but really what's essential, cutting out the noise in that. So is it like, what does credit mean to you, or what does earning a grade or a credit mean to you during this pandemic?
For our students, if they had a passing grade going into it, so as of March 13, then they will earn credit for this year. So everything at this point is just value added. So anything that they're completing while we're in this situation, they're able to raise their grades. But any student who was not passing before the pandemic, then we put in place the 8 weeks after spring break, that we took the time to really roll out that after spring break, we're going to start this ball rolling. And so we determined there was 8 weeks from then until June 5, which was our last day of school. If a student actively participated and completed all 8 weeks, we would guarantee they get credit for the class. So whether they had an 8% in the class or a 54%, you know, if they were up at that higher level of an F type of a thing and they were able to get themselves up to a passing grade, then great. But no matter what percent they had in that class going into the pandemic, there was an option for every student to earn credit.
I'm in kind of a unique situation with this because I've actually gone gradeless in my classroom. And so our grades in my classroom are determined by a conference where students have evaluated how they're doing on all the standards, what they've mastered, what they haven't, and they have to present to me proof that they've mastered the various standards, and then what grade do they feel they've earned for their learning. And when we agree, that's the grade that goes in the grade book for the quarter. That's a little harder to do now. So basically, I've given my students the option. If they would like to argue their grade and present to me their portfolio of how they've mastered the standards, they may still do that. But other than that, I went back and I gave them sort of a grade for the stuff that we had done from January until March 13th, just based on sort of completion. And then they can do the assignments that are distance learning. And I've been giving extra points to that the same way, the same additive model where it doesn't decline from them if they don't do it, but they have the chance to pass. And I've promised all my students that if you engage, if you read the books we're reading right now, if you engage in the assignments, there is no way you're not going to get credit, because that's just not fair. But I've left it up to them whether they'd like to do it a more traditional way or whether they'd like to do their portfolio. Most of my students have been choosing the more traditional way, I think, because it's easier right now and it's a lot less pressure on them to just keep up with the reading and do the assignments, which we started at Fahrenheit 451, and I was like, that's so appropriate right now, so we moved on to the Hunger Games. So yeah, most of them have been choosing to do that as their mode of gaining credit.
At our high school, we've been focusing on proficiency scales for about the last year. And based on our essential standards, we just kind of fell back on that. So regardless of the grades that you had coming into March, you know, most kids we already had either remediated up to the level of proficiency on our essential standards, or they were close and we're working with them. So we fell back on those. But one of the things I think that we kind of need to acknowledge now too is, I love what Kelly said earlier about cutting out the noise, and communicating that to families is really important, knowing that, you know, your kids, we're here to support your kids through into next year. And here's the things they need to know. It's not, you know, fluff. This is the stuff that they're going to see carried into next year, you know. And on top of that too, we need to start having a conversation. Like, our workforce is changing, like right now it's changing. And is some of the stuff we used to deem essential still essential? I'd love to see more statistics in mathematics at the high school. I know that's kind of the next horizon for Michigan. And, you know, just watching what's happening. And like Nick said too, with economics, like there's so many mathematical tie-ins there as well. We sure could be using this time a little bit more wisely. But yeah, that's how we approached it.
So I think for us, it was made very clear to us that, at least at Rochester, that grading was autonomous and each individual teacher had that discretion. However, like I said, we went to credit, no credit, revise for credit. And then I think what we really talk about in our staff meetings every week, we talk about this, that it really is up to the individual situation student. And so for me and a lot of my colleagues are doing the same thing. We're posting one assignment a week. And like that helps me as a teacher, again, like it's distilled down, and then I can clearly see who's doing it and who's not. And then I can follow up with the who's not. I can see, is this just an aberration? Because I put it in at the end of every week too. So before I post the next assignment, I make sure everything has been given feedback and everything's graded. And that's how I kind of justify only having that one assignment, because doing feedback for all those kids takes just as much time. But then I can really assess, okay, is it an aberration? Is it just once and they just had a busy week? Or is this a pattern? Is this something that I need to call home for? Do I need to alert the counselors and social worker? You know, do they have an IEP? What's happening there? And I think, again, that just streamlining the process helps us so much. And then at the end of the year, even with these seniors, we've really gone down individual. Okay, we have not heard from this kid, but we do know that they're all right, or we've checked in, yada, yada. And then it becomes, do we feel like at March that they had enough to graduate from high school? I really think if they were on track to graduate, like, they're okay. They're okay, and they will be fine. And so I really think we had to kind of come to terms with what our expectations for what it means to be a student, and being a student during a pandemic, and really just kind of letting that go. And teachers are our own worst enemy in that. We're like, they must know the facts, you know, and just kind of pulling ourselves down and taking a collective breath has really helped. But that's really what I think most teachers should do, is just kind of be as realistic as what we're telling students to be.
You remind me, Kelly, of when I first became an administrator in West Ottawa. We were using something called the teacher perceiver when we were screening candidates. I can't tell you the number of times I've asked questions and listened. And one of my favorite questions is, when a student says they want their teacher to be fair, what do they mean? And oftentimes we get into treat me the same. Everybody gets the same thing. And the reality is, the teachers who have an individualized perception know that fair is about dealing with individual students and based on their needs. And it sounds like you've appreciated from your administrators that they've treated you fair. They looked at your individual circumstances, as Owen said, about day to day and time to time. Ellie, you bring that up in that from students. And so I think this idea of what fair means is what that individual student needs. And you've amplified that with your conversation today as we go forward. Shifting forward with the little bit, about 10 minutes left in today's thing, I want to start by go to the next piece with Sarah. One of the things you talked about was this asynchronous versus synchronous learning. So I want you to tie in, how does that help people to have a fair opportunity to learn? And then I'd like to hear maybe from Rosalie around, as you're looking at this more globally as a counselor yourself, how do you see us needing to rethink or reframe maybe some of this that would be fair? And then we'll get other people to join in too. But if we can start with maybe Sarah talking about what it means to have this asynchronous opportunity, so that not everybody has to get on at the same time, versus synchronous, like when you're doing a hangout or this webinar. And then what does that mean as you think about reframing?
We've been able to collect the data, and it's been pretty amazing to see when kids are engaging, and it's not during regular school hours. and we actually, because teachers were saying, well, I'm having a drop off of kids coming to my Zoom meeting, and we started noticing some teachers putting like a little more teeth on coming to the Zoom meetings, and we're like, you know, we might want to check into that. So we did a feedback response in Maven, asking students, how do they feel about, you know, doing Zoom meetings? And as a counselor, we got exactly what we thought we would get, except a higher percentage. We thought a few more would like it, and it actually turned out that about 70% do not like them, and about 30% are okay with them, and for all the same reasons that we thought would happen, which was, you know, I don't want to be seen, which is why they keep their face, you know. They don't want people to see their house. Their house is crazy. They can't get a computer because it's a certain time. I have 3 Zoom meetings at the same time, even though we said, you know, to teachers, don't do that. And so all the reasons why we felt being asynchronous would be beneficial and more equitable for our students was really panning out as to what the student feedback came for us. And actually, along with parent feedback on the same thing, they were feeling this anxiety for their student to feel like they must be someplace at a certain time, and then they couldn't get the computer. And so, you know, moving forward, asynchronous is going to be critical, in my opinion. And kids are working. Kids are now working during school hours. And so for them to have an even chance of getting their work done or seeing their teacher, being able to deliver it in an asynchronous manner is going to be, you know, finding ways to do that is going to be really critical.
My ideas are kind of flying all over the place. And one of the things, as I listen to all of our panelists and kind of read the comments at the same time, I think what all educators are doing right now is modeling healthy behavior. From our superintendents to our administrators to us as staff, I'm hearing things about how you felt you've been treated as a professional from your bosses and your boss's bosses, and how they've modeled remaining calm and dealing with situations that none of us went to school and learned how to do or plan for or could ever imagine that something like this is happening. So I think, you know, we're modeling appropriate ways of managing our anxiety, how to take care of ourselves. We're providing structures for each other as colleagues, but also for our students, and how to organize life when it's chaos. And we can't do that unless we're in chaos. And we know that we have students that create their own chaos a lot of times because that's the only way they know how to live, because that's the environments that they come from, which is hard for us as people who don't live in chaos all the time and adjusting. So I think at the end of the day, this is all about building relationships. We are away from each other and we are away from our students, and we're obviously in this human environment that we thrive on interacting with each other. And without the ability to do that because of this pandemic, we've still had teachers go above and beyond within the school day, outside of the school day, to reach out to kids and families and build relationships maybe that were even really never there in the beginning because we were confined to, you know, 7:15 to 8:15 every day. And so I think, you know, if we want to look at a positive thing that's come out of this, I think, you know, we are showing, I love that word, grace. I think we're modeling positive self-care. I think that we are building strong relationships, and that's where we get that engagement from. That's how we get kids to continue up until June 1st or June 5th or June 12th, whatever that end date's going to be. I think hearing on the news, the predictions or possibilities of not going back in the fall continues to create that anxiety and that worry for not just all of us as adults who hopefully have some life skills and some good coping skills and some good support systems already in place. But when we think about our students, and not just our high school kids, but even our elementary kids, how are they going to deal with that? And what can we do within the relationships we have as classroom teachers to model appropriate ways of handling that? And it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to say that we're not okay and that we are struggling. I think, you know, when I can reach out to my administration and say, help me, please, I think that's healthy for me and to show my colleagues and my students that I don't have all the answers, and that's okay. And I think we all need to keep those in mind as a way to practice that self-care and how to rethink and reframe for the future. It is still completely unknown. And so I think the best way we can do that is to lean on each other, to continue with, you know, platforms like this where we can reach out and see how other people are doing it across the state and learn from each other. I think this has been a great, valuable experience.
So if we might just go around the horn and each of you take just a minute, what's a closing thought? Like when you think about next year, like Rosalie brought up, and the reality is school might be different. What's something from this year in this experience that you're looking forward to being able to take forward with you, knowing that there are these ugliness that you've had to deal with, the stresses that you have to deal with, the anxiety that you talked about, but maybe a 30-second, what's a closing thought for our principals who are on this panel as they prepare with their staffs for the coming year? What's a closing message? So maybe Aaron, and then yep.
Go ahead, Ben. I know you have to go. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just sorry. I was just going to say I have childcare for about one more minute here, so I may have to duck out. But I think speaking of being a parent, I think that's a really big. I don't know if it's a boat we missed on with this one, but parent mentoring would be amazing. I know I get frustrated as a teacher, kind of explaining things over and over again. But then I'm also the parent that needs that constant reminder with a kindergartner. Every time I get an email, it refers to some previous email, and I'm like, where's that one? I have no idea. You know, and so just always trying to keep all stakeholders in the loop, I think is something that I'm going to try and do a better job at. And I'm going to encourage my child's teacher and administration to do a better job at is just kind of start from ground zero every time you communicate with someone, because you can't make any assumptions. It's almost like another tier of support. I kind of call it like tier zero. Like we need to focus a little more on that. So I do have to run though. I apologize, you guys. Thanks, Colin.
And I would second that. 30-second, I think relationships are the most important thing here, all across the board. Relationships with our administrators, with our students, with our students' parents, everyone. We have to continue to build that bridge between each level of people that we deal with in this profession, and having empathy, even though this is not a situation that any of us have ever been through. And it's hard to empathize sometimes when we don't know what's going on, but I think having empathy and building those relationships is key.
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Kelly. No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, I would echo that, what Aaron just said, but I would also add too that I've really learned that it's not personal. So when a kid is not logging on to Zoom, that's not because of me. Or when a kid is not turning assignments, that's because of me. I feel like I've really decentered myself through this process and really kind of taken myself out of the equation. And I feel like if I had advice for principals and school leaders, it would be to do the same. So to realize that all teachers want to do their job just as much as students want to do their job, but then we all just need to take ourselves out of the process and realize it's the world right now. That's the problem. So I think knowing that and keeping that constantly in mind and having, administration reassure teachers of that thought is very powerful.
Yeah, and I was just going to piggyback off of Aaron and Kelly. It really is all about relationships and just trying to find new ways to keep the relationships. I mean, relationships, I feel like, has always been such an important part of teaching when it's one-to-one in the classroom. Well, we can't do it that way anymore. So now it's how do we continue to develop these relationships with our students, with our parents, with our fellow staff members in this new era of digital communication. And it's just crucial to then getting to the next steps of trying to provide content and information. So, yep, I totally agree with everyone there on relationship is the key here overall.
Kelly mentioned decentering, and I wanted to jump off on that because I think for me, one of the things personally for my personal practice that I've realized is how amazing this asynchronous learning can be when kids can jump around to what they need when they need it, and they can revisit things and they can take their time where they need it and speed forward when they can. I think one of the things I want to try to do personally moving forward is have more of a blended experience. I've also been taking a bunch of Michigan virtual PD on blended learning and asynchronous learning and stuff like that. And for me personally, I realized that the stuff I've been doing with tech in my classroom has just been tech enhanced. It hasn't been actually blended. But I think that moving forward, I want to try to have a library of resources so my students can say, okay, you said to write a thesis statement, but everything you taught me about thesis statements has fallen out of my head. Where's the video of Mr. Bondano teaching me how to do a thesis statement on the Google Classroom? How can I bring that asynchronous into our everyday classroom so that they can do things at their own pace and go back when they need it? I think that's so powerful. And just through using this as an experience to explore all those tools that are out there, I've learned so much about it in the last few weeks.
Echo what Owen said. For the last 4 years with my IB and AP classes, I've always done flipped instruction where students are watching my lectures on Edpuzzle, and I'm able to post questions within just to kind of do check-ins to see how they're doing on their notes. And this year I was so thankful that I had all of those resources available, especially during this closure period for those classes. So for me, it's bringing that into all of these other classes as well, how beneficial it is to have exactly what Owen said, to have that library of videos of you or other ones that you have found that help you establish that point, to be able to post those for students to be able to go back to on their own time. And also to echo what a lot of you have already said, it's interesting when I post my assignments on Monday that sometimes when I go to bed Tuesday night and wake up Wednesday morning, all of a sudden there's 8 people have done it that hadn't done it Tuesday night. So, in the middle of the night, they're sitting there watching math videos, which kudos to them. It's very exciting.
I was thinking how really for the administrators as they're working to help teachers get up to speed, because there's obviously some very talented blended learning teachers on here right now, and then there's some teachers who don't, haven't ever done that before. So there's a lot of there's scaffolding, I guess, that needs to be done for PD for teachers. And I think, administrators approaching that just the same way they did right after the shutdown, which is with a lot of empathy and understanding people are in different places, and just like our students are in different places. But it will be really, important for administrators to sort of boil down to what they believe will be, something in their district that's going to work, and make sure teachers aren't all over on all kinds of different platforms, because, from what we've been hearing, that's confusing for kids when that happens. And so getting those teacher leaders who can help train the other teachers in their buildings will be great. And then the support from administrators to do so is really going to be key. But that simplification and that, empathy for where people are at with their technology will be really important.
We're fortunate to have such a distinguished panel of educators who are here with us today to share their expertise and their experiences. So first and foremost, thank you for giving up your time, sharing your stories, and informing our practice. This is incredible, and we are very thankful for the energy and the passion that you bring and the focus on children. As we go forward, I want you to think about, all of you, what this means moving forward. Our initial question is, how is this similar or in conflict with what your own current experiences are? So remember, our perspectives control our realities. And as our teachers here have demonstrated in the depersonalization and really bringing their own passion to it, made a difference in their students' learning, because adult culture does shape student learning. As we go forward, I want to encourage you to look at the patterns of evidence that you have. Ben brought that up as far as what is it telling us now and what that experience is, from when kids enter and access content to how our teachers are approaching and how they're feeling. What does that tell about us? Be willing to adapt the content, the priorities, the plan, taking out the white noise kind of that people brought up, and really simplifying what's important in life and what's important in the classroom. Knowing that people have good intentions. Nobody's approaching learning to do harm. And so the idea that each of us have our own realities and each of us have our own challenges, and that we're doing the best we can with the skills and the knowledge we have. And last and foremost, I think, remember, as building principals and as classroom teachers, we can be a thermostat or we can be a thermometer. And it's so important, particularly during crisis, to be that thermostat, setting the stage, bringing the pressure down, bringing the heat down, and giving permission that this is good and that we do. Because each and every day as educators, you get to touch the future. And we are blessed in Michigan to have a future being influenced by people like you. So with that, I say thank you for joining us. Know that next week we're going to have a student perspective. So Matt Alley's been with us, and so he's going to join with that. And then the following week, we have Kim Marshall from the Marshall Memos, and we're going to end the year with this series around a superintendent perspective and forecasting. What do we think the future of secondary education is going to look like? I think our teachers today gave us a really good idea of what could be. So thank you for that. We wish you well as you move forward.